Are you a good promise keeper?
Yes, I am.
How so?
I am very faithful towards friends.
I keep big promises, sometimes like little ones that I make out of impulse. I don't keep all the time.
Yeah, I would consider myself a good promise keeper.
When my friends tell me something, I know how to keep a promise. I don't have a big mouth.
I've never made a promise that I can't keep, ever.
I'd say I am. I haven't broken any promises yet.
Yeah, I keep all my promises, especially the ones I make to my friends or to myself. It's terrible to break a promise.
Well, I'm the man to go to if you need a promise kept or a secret or something.
An old Hebrew proverb says,
"Promise little and do much."
in 5 simple words, it gives us tremendously wise words to live by.
Promises weigh heavy, but so many times we offer them in a cavalier way, not truly weighing what we are committing ourselves to.
We can hear ourselves say, "I promise I'll be there. Your party sounds great."
But in the end, we decide we'll bail out and hang out at home instead.
Or we get a better offer and blow off the invitation we received first.
After all, we think, no one will miss me, and I can come up with some excuse to explain why I didn't come after all.
Anyone with any sense would understand that a better opportunity came up, right?
Well, maybe, but not always.
Promise keeping. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Gabby.
And I'm Abe.
And this is RealfaithTV. Many of the teens on the street saw themselves as good promise keepers.
We'll talk with them more in a few minutes, as well as meet our studio guests.
But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, John.
He'll describe what a good promise keeper is to him.
And how he's not always the best at keeping his word.
I think being a good promise keeper means keeping your word, making sure you do what you're asked and you agree to do. I think it's very important that friends true to their word, because if they're not, you can't depend on them, and that's what friends are for. But if you trust a friend, you'll be able to tell them your problems, they'll be able to help you through them, and you'll have someone to lean on when you need help. I don't think I'm a good promise keeper. I usually have trouble remembering things, so when someone asks me to do something, I kind of forget. When my dad was away, he asked me to mow the lawn and keep our lawn looking good, and I forgot. I remembered the last day, so I got it done, but so the lawn looked pretty bad. I wouldn't do that again. And then another time that I was asked to keep an important promise was when I had to get stuff for a project that we had to do. I didn't. Kept a couple times when a friend did something really dumb in class and the teacher was kind of mad and he didn't want me to tell anyone.
You know, I think John's absolutely right in saying that being a good promise keeper makes a good friend, but it definitely is very hard to keep those promises sometimes.
Well, let's see what our studio guests think about this topic.
Okay, they are Bill, Laura, Vince, Bree, Caitlin, Andrew, and Chris.
What is a promise keeper to you?
And would you consider yourself one?
I think a promise keeper is somebody who understands what a promise is, and they don't want to let you down, so they try their best, and they don't just disrespect you and let it go for nothing.
Yeah, I have to say I consider myself a promise keeper. It really frustrates me if I can't keep a promise for some extenuating circumstance, or if someone else doesn't keep a promise. And I like to live by that example that if I make a promise, I'm going to follow it through, and I'm going to keep that promise regardless.
I think I'm a good promise keeper, but I'm not a particularly avid promise maker because I want to make sure any promise I make I can keep.
Yeah, I would say I'm a promise keeper as well because I'm trustworthy, and I also live by treat others how you would like to be treated. So if I want people to keep my promises, I'll keep theirs.
I think falling in line with keeping promises is, being responsible, being a trustworthy person, and I feel like I've done that in my life so far.
I think on most occasions I'm a good promise keeper because in difficult situations and different scenarios, it can be hard to keep a promise.
I agree with that. I can also be a good promise keeper, but it kind of depends on the situation.
Yeah, you all made a lot of very good points. Trustworthiness does have a lot to do with promise keeping. And even most of us who are good at it, and most of us who find ourselves to be good promise keepers, you would even know that keeping promises isn't easy, even though it sounds like it.
Most of the time, we associate it with keeping secrets.
While they are two distinctly different things, they both require one to be trustworthy.
Whether it's in keeping a private matter to oneself or honoring a pledge,
our word matters and shows that we can either be genuine or deceiving.
Next, the teens on the street share their experience with promise keeping.
Let's check it out.
My rule is I will be honest and I will keep secrets and I will keep promises just so long as they don't hurt anybody else. And I am friends with the people that I'm friends with because they know that I'm honest. And if they ask me to keep a secret, or keep a promise, they know that I'm good for it.
Sometimes my sister tells me stuff that I shouldn't tell people, and I do. And so I break her promises. And she still has trust in me, though.
There have been times I've had plans for weekends and we're supposed to come out here, and right as we're about to leave, my friend's like, oh, I don't want to go, I'm tired.
We have this one friend, and he's always promising to hang out with us and pick us up because he drives and whatnot. And he has this girlfriend who hates us, and he's always ditching us and breaking all his promises for us.
There was a promise once that I made to my environmental club to fulfill the job requirements, and I did them.
My friend in middle school always confided in me girls that he would like, and he'd always ask me for advice and stuff about them, and I'd always keep the secret well.
Usually when I tell my friends not to tell about people I have a crush on, they do ultimately tell because everyone likes gossip.
Is it always easy to be a promise keeper?
I think we definitely talked about this earlier. We said depending on circumstances, usually it varies. Sometimes it's easy to keep a promise. If you tell your parents, oh, by the end of the day I'll vacuum the floor or something, it's easy to keep that promise than if your friend tells you something that you really should go and tell an adult, but you promise that you won't. That's always a big challenge there.
Yeah, that was a situation similar to what Phil was talking about. One of my friends had claimed that she had done something that was really detrimental to her health, and the entire time at a rehearsal I was at, she was just knocked out on the floor, and one of her friends was just comforting her. I felt that that was something important. I felt that I really needed to say something, and they all asked me to promise not to say anything about it because they figured they could handle the situation. I didn't think so, and I did report it. And in the end, I feel that I did the right thing because I'd rather her be alive and well as opposed to sick and holding a secret or keeping something important that could be detrimental to her health.
I think it really matters on the situation and remembering, because you could be like, yeah, Mom, I'll do the dishes before I go out, I promise, and then you just forget because you're caught up with the time and rush out of the house or whatever.
As a promise keeper, we are afforded a responsibility to look out for the well-being of others.
When a friend entrusts us with a secret, they are confiding in us thoughts and feelings they do not want revealed to the rest of the world.
We are expected to be loyal and true to our word.
But are there exceptions to keeping promises?
Are there times when we should break them?
That's what we asked the teens on the street.
Let's hear them now.
If somebody does something unlawful or something like that, I think that somebody should be told.
Yes, when someone's in danger.
Under no circumstances should you break a promise.
If someone tells you something that want to keep hidden, you don't tell everyone. It's just wrong. It's gonna hurt someone.
If someone comes up to me and says, hey, I'm doing heroin, don't tell my parents, that's a promise I can't keep, and that's a promise I wouldn't make, because that's an issue, that's a problem. As long as it is something that does not hurt others or hurt themselves, then that's a promise that I can keep.
Definitely, if it's for someone's good, if someone tells you, don't dare tell anyone, and, the person's life, well-being, whatever is at risk, there's exceptions.
I'm not really into, quote-unquote rats, but basically if you really feel that it's hurting somebody's, better well-being, then yes, you should tell the truth.
I believe you should break a promise if it affects other people in a harmful way.
If my friend were to tell me not to tell her mom about something illegal that she's doing or something dangerous, I'd have to tell her.
It's when it's something serious, if someone comes up to you and tells you that they threaten that they want to kill themselves or that they injure themselves because of pain, severe instances like that, you should definitely break the promise to keep this secret and tell somebody.
This year, my friend went through a lot of changes. She was a new kid in our school, and she suffered from depression. Whether it was a result of being the new kid in school, I'm not sure, but as a result of her sad feelings, she would cut herself. And she told me in confidence, she texted me one day out of the blue. I didn't even suspect it, so I was taken by surprise by it. But ultimately, she told me not to tell anybody. She wanted to keep it private, but she thought she'd let me know. And I was very distraught by it because I've never had to deal with a situation like that. So I ended up going to a guidance counselor, and I told her anonymously that I had known this information. And she did call her father, and she didn't tell her father that I was the one who told my guidance counselor. But I had to break a promise in that situation because it was a matter of life and death, and she could have really hurt herself.
I also know a couple people actually who are depressed and have had many suicidal thoughts. I have this one friend who he was telling me how he wanted to kill himself and all this stuff, and I ended up telling somebody and they were able to talk to his parents, and I'm pretty sure he's back on track now. I had another friend who called me up telling me about this girl who was going to kill herself that night, and we ended up talking and we ended up praying, and my mom ended up calling her mom and her dad and so on, and they ended up fixing it, and I'm pretty sure she's better now, but still.
You saved her life in that situation.
Yeah, that's definitely a time you really want to break a promise when someone's life is at hand. And I can't say the experience I'm going to talk about is as deep, but it could have progressed to that. One of my friends, she's a real perfectionist. She really always has to do things perfectly, and as many times as you say, the only perfect being is God, no human can do that, she won't listen. And it got really bad at one point where she mentally was starting to break down because she just couldn't reach that level of perfection she wanted. And she was getting sick, her grades were falling, and it got to the point where like she said to me, she was like, please don't tell anyone, you have to promise. And I promised, and I hate breaking all promises, whether it's in my hands or not, but I had to, and I went to my guidance class, I was like, listen, she's really, she's falling apart. Can we do anything about it? And they were able to arrange it with her mom, and she's still struggling with it, but I think now that she has help, she's pulling out of it and starting to come to terms with who she is and what she's actually capable of doing.
My friend, he used to drive me every Friday, and we would go get pizza after cross country. So one day he's driving me, and he just whips out his phone and starts texting while he's driving. And I gave him a weird look, and he said, don't worry about it, just don't tell anybody and we'll be fine. So, sure enough, next Friday he's texting again, not paying attention, and he hits the back of a guy's car. And he gets out of the car, and it got crazy, and before he got out of the car he said, don't say anything. And he handles the situation terribly, he starts yelling, and eventually the police get there, and I was in the front seat, and he comes up to me and goes, sir, what did you see? And I had to tell him because I knew that he would continue to text and it would get 10 times worse because he could be not paying attention at 90 miles per hour rather than 25.
Next, our spotlight guest John shares how he actively broke a promise to a friend
in order to alert school officials about a friend who was being bullied.
There's a kid bullying people, and a friend of mine who was being bullied by him didn't want anyone to know about it. Had me promise not to tell anyone that he was being bullied because he didn't want to be a snitch or anything. Everyone saw it and wouldn't do anything. I decided to actually do something about it, so I told the teacher what was going on. I felt pretty good that I did that I stopped the kid from bullying people. I don't know why he was bullying him, but if I had to guess, he's probably just jealous because the one kid was really smart. They're both smart though. My friend and the bully, they found they had common interests because they got paired up for a group project. So they decided to become pretty good friends. My friend figured it out later because I was the only one who he told. So he figured it out, but he didn't care because he got a new friend and he was pretty happy about that.
In the Old Testament, we see that the kingdom of Israel became divided when the people of God turned away from him.
By breaking God's commandments, they failed to keep their promise to him.
Instead of breaking his pledge, God remained ever faithful to his word.
The prophecies of the Old Testament are a great place to begin to understand the promises of God.
For these promises were fulfilled in the coming of the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ.
Next, John talks to us about how being unfaithful in our word goes against God's commandments.
And how those closest to Jesus were also fallible in breaking their promises to him.
The 10 Commandments, they tell you to don't bear false witness. They don't tell you to lie about something. So if someone asks you to tell something that's not true and you promise, you should break that promise. One time when I was in religion class, me and a few kids were just messing around in the back of the class. We had a wasp fight, which are paper things. The teacher found them and yelled at us, but she wanted to know who else was involved. I thought that if I actually tell her, the teacher, we might not get in as much trouble. So I told her who was involved. We just got notes home. Nothing really happened. She forgot about it the next day. I think it was a good thing that we told her the truth, because if we hadn't and she found out later, she might have been a little harsher on us. I don't really think that there's a scripture teaching that directly tells you to keep a promise, but if I had to pick one, it would be in the gospel, when Jesus said Peter would deny him 3 times and Peter swore that he wouldn't, then he broke that promise, it kind of shows that we're all imperfect, but even the most famous apostles, and that we all need to work to be better at keeping promises and keeping our word.
As people of faith, why is it important to keep our word, even if it concerns simple things?
If God can find it in his greatness to keep his promises to us no matter what we do, his promise to love us, his promise to care for us, his promise of his eternal kingdom, I think that we should respect each other and keep our promises to each other. They're not as grand, but at the same time, they are still important, and they all have some relevance to our life.
As John was saying in the spotlight, it's important to follow the commandments. That's what God wanted, that's what Jesus wanted, and I'm sure even like the little things, Jesus would have kept a promise, and that's what he wants us to do.
Using Jesus as the ultimate role model, he kept the little promises, and then he kept the big promises too. Like, he died a horrible death. So if he can keep that promise, I think we can keep a simple promise as well.
Saint Teresa Lisieux, she was all about how the little things added up to be important together. So even if you keep a bunch of little promises, it's as if you did something big, because it's the little moments that add up together of people being able to rely on you, that overall they'll know that you're a trustworthy person.
Yeah, little things repeated over a long time make a big difference.
So with this in mind, if we carefully consider the situation of not keeping our promises,
We recognize that we are offending God, hurting our neighbor, who we are called to love.
and we are also offending ourselves,
We're not living the life Jesus wants us to have.
Jesus wants us to live in truth and as a consequence, enjoy the relationships of integrity.
Besides, if we live by the old Hebrew proverb and do much in modesty.
We will offer our communities an example of service and love.
Next, we asked the teens on the street if they felt faith played a part in their promise keeping.
Let's hear what they had to say.
Yes. When it comes to being Catholic and like you're faithful and loyal, that also has to do with you being a good person.
I don't think that faith has anything to do with what you have a promise. It's just who you are as a person. You should be able to keep your promises.
If anything, I closely follow Buddhism, and I'm pretty sure that they teach you there to be a good person, to keep promises and stuff.
Yeah, I'm Catholic, and I always follow God and everything. I try and follow the Bible pretty well, so I just try and stay on the straight and narrow path.
As far as what I've learned in faith, I just learned that it's better to keep the promises that you are going to say you'll make, because in the outcome, it won't work out well if you don't keep them.
The one thing that I've learned from all religions is everyone says the same thing. Live and let live, be a good person. Follow your faith, whatever faith you are.
What have you learned from your faith or from Jesus about importance of giving your word and keeping promises?
Well, he would always tell the truth, and it's a sin to lie, so I always follow what he says and to tell the truth no matter what it is.
I'm all about giving my word. I'm not into like lying and things like that.
If you're gonna say you're gonna do something, you should follow through with it, because then that just makes you a liar.
You gotta stand by your word. If you're gonna tell someone one thing and do another thing, then that's not cool.
In the long run, it will help you better when you keep your promises, because people respect you more and trust you more.
So in what ways can our faith help us to better keep our promises?
I think first and foremost, attending Mass, reconciliation, that sort of thing. Speaking with your priest if you have any questions like regarding a promise that you set out to keep.
Acknowledging Jesus as an excellent role model for keeping promises, as Chris had stated earlier.
And as being a person of faith, we understand that there's a God that is ever watching us. Knowing that, you kind of want to be an honest, truthful person. And not only do we make promises to people around us, but we make promises to God as well. It's just like the story of Abraham in the Bible. Now, he promised God that he would do like everything that he asked him to, he wouldn't question anything, And it even got to the point where God asked him to sacrifice his own son, and Abraham was ready to do that. Making our promises to God affects how we act towards the people around us. We promise to the people around us that we are going to be that Christian person. We're going to abide by those Christian morals. And it was at our baptism that we made our first promise to God.
And although we may have been too young to acknowledge this, it was a promise made by our parents and godparents on our behalf.
Through the sacrament of confirmation, we come knowingly and willingly to renew our promise with God.
Knowing that even when we can't count on ourselves, we can always count on God.
Because he keeps his promises.
Finally, John shares with us how he sees God as the ultimate promise keeper.
God's the only one who we can completely keep secrets in. And like with confession, we can say, "Oh, Father, I've done this." When the priest guides you through it, like if you've done something to someone and you don't want them to know, he could like tell you that you should tell them and ask them for their forgiveness. You know that he's acting on behalf of God, so that's pretty nice that you know you can trust in the priest and God. The apostles and the gospel writers, that they trusted in God enough not to break the promises. With God promising that he would save us all and send us to heaven through Jesus, I think that's a great promise, and it helps inspire me every day to do the right thing and to become a better person and not be mean to people, keep my word, and I'm actually becoming a much better promise keeper.
I think when it comes to our promises to God, like it really starts for us truly at confirmation when we're conscious and we can make the decision. I mean, at confirmation, God basically grants us the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, and we promise to use them to the best of our abilities. Some people fall through with that promise. Ultimately, it's up to us to really keep that promise and use them as Christians and followers of Christ.
Also, at confirmation, we say that we believe and that we will always believe in God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And when you keep your promise to God, that's what you're keeping, that you will always believe.
I definitely think that when it comes to our promises with God, if you look at a lifeline between us and God, he always will keep his end tight. He will always hold on, and he will always never let go. So I think that we should not let go. I think that we should definitely be committed to holding our relationship and our promises with God, just like we should have that commitment with each other.
Yeah, I agree. Like, Jesus kept his promise to us. So I think by keeping our promises to others, it shows respect to Jesus and shows that we're following through with our promises just like he did.
Yeah, and you know, just as John said, the story with Peter denying Jesus 3 times, and Jesus redeemed him by asking him 3 times if he loved him. You know, in the end, Peter was like, "Oh, Lord, you know I love you. Like, what's wrong with you? Why do you keep asking me this?" And Jesus said, like, you know, feed my sheep, feed my flock. And Peter did promise to feed his sheep and to feed his flock, and he eventually became the foundation of our church. God has faith in us to fulfill our promises to him, and not just because it's a challenge for us,
but because it is the true path to love and eternal life.
So depend not on your own human abilities to guide you along this journey,
but seek God's grace to lift you when you fall.
Rely on his strength, which never fails, to renew you in your ongoing baptismal promise.
How can you become a better promise keeper in today's world?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us at RealfaithTV.com.
Or follow us on Twitter.
And we'll leave you with these words from Woody Guthrie's song, God's Promise.
I give you truth when you need it, my help from above.
Undying friendship, my unfailing love.
So let's do our best to keep our promises.
And thank God that he always keeps his.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on Real Faith TV. And that's a promise.
God bless.